Hi, this is Pat Moorhead, and we are live for another 6-5 podcast. It is Wednesday. It is different. Usually we're doing this on a Friday, but to Daniel Newman's credit, we are cranking this out because Dan has to fly back from an undisclosed location on Friday. But the great news is we have so much content, and it's 2 p.m. Central, that we can crank this thing out midweek. Dan, how you doing?
Hey, man. Listen, sometimes it just works out, and this week I'm in an undisclosed location. Although if you look at Twitter, you'll see that, the Futurum Group was the sponsoring research partner of the Digital Enterprise Show in Malaga. And so I may or may not be overseas somewhere near that location. And listen, there was so much news that hit so early in this week. I woke up this morning inspired and jet lagged, and I said, Pat, let's do this thing today because I'm worried if we wait, it won't get done. And there's just too many good things to provide, our killer commentary on this week. So good to be here,
so
buddy.
good to be back. I mean, there could have been 3 events I could have gone to, but 5 weeks on the road, couldn't do it. But I'm glad we're here. And by the way, if it's your first time on the 6-5 or listening to 6-5 or watching it, you've been living under a rock, because we do think we are the preeminent leader in technology analysis. There we go. Did I just say that? I mean, we love our fans, but we do try to bring it. Also, we're going to talk. What's that?
It's not about you.
No, but sometimes it's about you. So anyways, we're going to be talking about publicly traded companies. Don't take anything we say or infer as investment advice. Find a professional. But I'm super excited for the show. Again, midweek, and we have 6 incredible topics that we cover from 5 to 10 minutes each. We're going to be talking about the AMD Datacenter and AI launch they had. Daniel attended Salesforce AI Day in New York City. That was one of the events I could have attended but couldn't. IBM had a recent quantum breakthrough. In fact, today, a few hours ago, I think, needs to be shared. Oracle beat Raise. We're going to be talking about them. Lenovo made a disclosure this morning as well about how it's going in AI that we think is worthy of discussion. And finally, we're going to talk about Microsoft's Activision deal hitting a snag here in the United States. So I am going to start. I'm going to call my own number. So AMD had a big data center and AI event in San Francisco, which I was not available to attend, but was invited. But I copiously took notes and tweeted as Lisa Su and company were going through all of the announcements. And I got to tell you, it was a big one. I mean, literally, they covered at least 8 very meaty topics. They talked about, first of all, you had the data center side where they talked about 3 flavors of EPYC, Genoa, Bergamo, Genoa X, and how they were doing in those areas. They also talked about the next generation DPU, Pensando DPU. But what I think particularly investors wanted to know, and quite frankly, the entire market is AI crazy, is what is the company doing in hyperscaler data center AI? And AMD did not disappoint. They made a bunch of announcements. So first of all, they gave an update on the Instinct MI300A that's targeted at HPC markets. That is essentially a CPU, a GPU with a ton of memory on it, really for HPC markets. It may or may not be computing with NVIDIA that has a combination with the Grace platform. They also brought out the MI300X, which I think was really the star of the show, was what everybody was waiting for, right? It is for large language model inference, sampling Q3, 192 gigabytes of memory, and where most of NVIDIA's cards have 80 gigs of memory, which essentially equates to being able to do more work with less GPUs. Super interested to see, though, how it competes with NVIDIA's 188 gigabyte H100 NVL solution. AMD showed running a 40 billion parameter Hugging Face model on one card, and this was super impressive. It also showed they also brought out a new platform called the AMD Infinity Architecture platform. That's 8 MI300 cards pulled together on one platform with Infinity interconnect as its interconnect. So cool stuff. Now, let me boil all this tech speak down to where I think AMD is in AI. But I want to first caveat that I think the way to look at AI is holistic, going all the way from the smallest IoT endpoint to the hyperscale and everything in between. That is the full capability. It's training, it's inference, it's CPU, GPU, NPU, FPGA across multiple types of platforms. But when we narrow in on this hyperscale AI accelerator market that AMD CEO Lisa Su says will be $150 billion coming up from $30 billion this year, we have to augur in on that. And AMD did not disappoint with this MI300X. Now, did I expect AMD to come out with some, statement that they were going to put a knockout blow on NVIDIA? Absolutely not. You'd have to be a fool to expect that. And some short-term investors sold AMD stock based on this. I view this as at the beginning of the AI data center move that AMD is making, not some middle point. Now, there's been a lot of work on high performance computing, but don't confuse that with AI. Sometimes they cross, but many times they don't. Now, I believe that in the end, I would say within the next 6 months, we will see a major hyperscaler make an announcement with AMD, and they will drive some serious volume. Now, is that based on some mistake that NVIDIA is making? Absolutely not. But here's the thing. These hyperscalers want choice. NVIDIA has 95% market share in the hyperscaler data center AI accelerator space. So AMD, I think, can pick up 10, 20% share over the next 4 years. But that still means that NVIDIA can drive a heck of a lot of volume. And by the way, I also think Intel is in the mix. So again, anybody who thinks this is going to be a winner-take-all scenario doesn't understand technology ecosystems, or for that matter, business logic. And then, by the way, if all that doesn't work, as we saw with Microsoft in 1998, Google and Amazon in this decade, the global regulatory folks show up on your doorstep. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. I think AMD will get 20% of that market by 2027. But AMD first needs a major hyperscaler to show up with big support that leads to big volume and revenue. If not, all bets are off. Check out my Forbes article where I augured into 1,200 words of pure joy and analysis on AMD's event.
You done?
I'm done.
Anything else?
Nope.
On that one. All right. Listen, that's really good analysis. I'm sitting there, and you did hit a lot of the talking points one-to-one that were on my mind. So I just want to maybe make a few reiterating points about what happened yesterday. First of all, this was a seminal moment because what we just saw was the first company that's really declaratively showing a competitive roadmap to NVIDIA right now. And yes, I'm talking mostly related to data center GPU and hyperscale AI. And this has to happen. I want to be very clear about that. Technology does not move at a pace that it's capable of if, in fact, you have a single sole source competition or lack of competition, you could call it. And let's be very clear. Right now, when it comes to the AI stack for enterprise, it is a monopoly. There's really no other way to look at it. You have
by definition, it is a monopoly. Anything over 50% market share in a certain market, then the only question is, are you abusing it?
Right. And then, that's more or less something that, the tom-toms on the street are suggesting as the company has gotten bigger, it has had more power in terms of how it bundles its solutions. It's had it's had pricing power, margins up in the mid 70s now. The kind of power that Intel perhaps once enjoyed when it had a much more significant market share than it has today. And let's face it, everybody called that into question and called for potential abuse of that power. And it actually, to some extent, limited. And you see over time, one mistake or two mistakes or a few mistakes, and suddenly that monopolistic power or just even that market dominance can quickly fade. But let's, even going away from some of the regulatory concerns, AI is not, we are still in the infancy of seeing the applications and the power of AI. We're in the earliest days of seeing the number of workloads. For a long time, we've thought about data centers through the lens of compute data centers for running the traditional workloads, applications, ERP, things that we're thinking about for our business. There's a whole new data center build out on a global scale that's going to need to take place for AI. And so you're going to walk into these Equinix facilities and you're going to turn right and there's going to be traditional data center compute, and you're going to turn left and there's going to be AI data centers with racks and racks and racks, or what do you call them? Rackham. But there's going to be racks and racks and racks of AI, of compute power for AI workloads and networking for workloads. And that's going to be the next big boom of opportunity. So when, Pat, you talked about a 20% market share claim, I think they could get 20% without actually taking any revenue share, meaning NVIDIA could continue to grow substantially while AMD ends up with 20% of the market, because there is just so much market, and the capacity for one vendor to take care of all the business opportunity is unlikely. The other thing is, these hyperscalers, you already see that they're moving dependence away from any of the traditional semiconductor and fabless manufacturers. And a lot of them are pairing up with ARM or others, to build their own ASICs or chips, whether that's been Facebook, whether Meta, whether that's been Alibaba, So anyways, that's another big thing that's going to happen. But I said this yesterday, Pat, and I think I'll end on this note. Yesterday was a big moment because what the market needs is more than one. The market needs more than one, and it also needs an open source player to come in. If you look at right now, the opportunity for open source means much more of an ecosystem friendly play. So you can bring together the networking, you can bring together the compute, you can bring together the applications and the frameworks, and you give the community a chance to build, you will see a certain share of the market. I think your predictions are probably in the right ballpark, and I'll end there.
No, I appreciate that. So let's talk more AI. Shocking about Salesforce. Dan, you and I have talked about Salesforce AI a ton. What did you learn in New York?
Yeah, look, I had the chance to get out to New York to hear from Mark Benioff, for what I'd say is a very large limited crowd. It was a special opportunity to be out there, but it was a mix of customer, partner, executive, and a very small group of analysts. I missed you there, buddy.
I missed you too.
We got to hear from Gucci, and he did create a new word when he talked about how they were using Customer 360 and AI, and he said he's going to Gucciify. And I was just thinking of you, Mr. Montclair there, if you could Montclarify something for me. But, in all serious, look, he started off in his first quote was from Mark Benioff was, and I jotted it down, maybe it's the most important technology of any lifetime. So, you hear it, most important technology of this lifetime. He said of any lifetime. And I think that was, that resounded with me. A couple things I walked away with that are a little bit more macro, on the macro level things for me is one is there is a important demarcation going on right now between companies that have long been in AI and understood and supported and invested, and those that are sort of in their Me Too moment, meaning, all of a sudden it's a big deal. We're going to have an AI story. Salesforce has had an AI story for a long time. They've been focused and investing on a huge level, 210 patents in AI. So they've been spending money developing technology more than a decade, working in LLMs, going back, many years. And you remember hearing about Einstein. I mean, Einstein was announced in 2016. That was when Benioff promised an AI in your boardroom to help you make better decisions. So it's been part of the ethos for some time. Having said that, I don't think it's landed particularly well for Salesforce. I think to some extent the company looks like they're a little bit more of a follower in terms of how it's been perceived, coming out with all their GPT products. So the question was really, what does it do? Like why do you need it at the app layer if you can get it all in Vertex, or you can get it all in OpenAI on Microsoft Azure AI? And I think what it comes down to is this is a great example of where that data layer comes into play. And they showed a really wonderful example of how proprietary data and kind of open internet data can make the big difference. And Pat, you and I have we played around with using like a Bard or a ChatGPT to do a press release. Remember, we kicked that one around and we were like, oh, this is pretty good. But the problem is it doesn't have any of that important proprietary data. So they were showing some great examples of how you could write a custom sales letter to a prospected customer where you could give references and you could then give specific examples and timelines. And because you have all the kind of sales cloud data, the data cloud, plus the open LLMs tied together, now instead of just writing that generic release, it could write a very prescriptive, specific release. But then on top of it, it adds all kinds of layers of governance. So for instance, if you wanted to give references, it would have the ability to redact a name or a company name or a specific example, but still provide and write for you a more genericized letter. And so they were kind of showing a really real world example of how these two worlds are combining in the app layer to start creating better content and work through a sales funnel. So that's just kind of an example, but I really thought that was powerful to see how really what we're so impressed by, these kind of generic generative creations, really are crap. You could never send these things. Like, someone even said that to me, like, Pat, if I send a letter and you want it to look like it's coming from me, it'll probably have DN at the end. And it would never say like, hello, Mr. something. It would always be like, yo, sup, or whatever it is. It sounds like it's me. And that's the other thing with Data Cloud and LLMs that it can do is it can look at the history of all the things you've written and all the interactions you have with customers to get a sense of your style, your tone, and start to make things seem more personal. So I thought that was a really, powerful example. But let me just tell you what I tweeted that Mark Benioff liked, because that was
it's not about you, Daniel.
That was important. That was important that I figured out a way to get that in. But really, what resonated with me, and actually, I had the chance to talk to the Wall Street Journal about this, was the Gen AI and its importance to create trust. Because really, right now, I think this is where a lot of the confusion exists. Okay, so in order for Salesforce or any company to win, there's kind of three tenets of trust that I've identified, and Salesforce really reiterated these, which is something I like. But one is trusting the quality of the output. We keep hearing about hallucinations. Salesforce plus Data Cloud believes they can give you more to trust in the quality of output. Two, trust in safety, bias, transparency. To me, that's somewhat table stakes that IBM, Amazon, Google, Microsoft are all saying they're doing that, but Salesforce competently has ticked that box. And then the third is, trust in how the data gets used. Salesforce was adamant that, and they put their tenets of trusted AI. Your data is not our product, data residency and compliance, customer control and privacy, enterprise scale, built-in security, ethical and design and practice. So they're promising that there is no risk of your data being used for anything other than what you want to specifically use it for. And right now, that's an important message from any company playing in this space. There's a lot more, but I could keep going forever. And I just want to leave a little bit of space for you to weigh in.
No, I appreciate that. So due to a family matter, I wasn't able to auger in and watch this, but I have read many of the documents that came out and a lot of the press coverage. I just want to say this up front. So Salesforce is in a similar position, I think, that IBM is, even though they're in different businesses with AI, right? You had IBM that came out with Watson in 2011, and it really got a lot of fanfare at once, but it really didn't end up driving anything incrementally for IBM. Same thing with Einstein in 2016. I think we did a podcast on this, or it didn't make sense to me that chatbots were just not smart enough. So I didn't see how Salesforce, who, by the way, understands their SaaS swim lanes really well, was going to deliver something that nobody else could deliver, and they didn't. Einstein did not work well, not necessarily just because of Salesforce, but because overall bots weren't intelligent. Generative AI was here. We were using deep learning and machine learning. But I do believe that when you separate this generative AI into consumer and enterprise, there are different success characteristics, primarily because the type of data that you're looking at is going to be more focused. It's not world data, okay? It's not beating somebody on Jeopardy. It's not winning some sort of history award. And I think what we've seen recently, lawyers trying to use it in the courtroom where it created cases, right? That came not through a centralized legal service using generative AI and that data set, but world knowledge. It was creative. So when I look at Salesforce's sales, service, marketing, commerce, data cloud, even visualization with Tableau, MuleSoft automation, the things you can do with Slack. I mean, heck, Slack at its core is an intelligent way to communicate through chat. And I connect that to Chat GPT and the way that we're working. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity here. And like, let's say, Oracle Fusion, like IBM, where they're using narrow data sets, I think real magic is going to happen. And I think jobs over time are going to be transformed. There are some jobs that are going to go away. I would call those taskmaster jobs, and there will be some that will be added. So I think Salesforce is right where it needs to be, in that it's taking intelligent conversations about it. They're showing a certain level of maturity and thought leadership, and the areas, the SaaS areas that they're in, are ripe for generative AI. The question is just, can they either gain market share? Can they increase the basket? Overall, the vision of Salesforce is to be able to combine these disparate services into a horizontal platform in not the same way as Google and Microsoft, but in a way that represents that shows the power of the platform. I'm going to do more research on it, and we'll be putting out a note soon. So let's move off the prior two AI topics and move into IBM Quantum. We keep
You're doing my job, and then I forgot. Just keep going.
I'm sorry. I thought you told me to go for it.
Yeah, you know what? From here on out, just keep going. Do your thing, man.
So listen, in the history of the 6.5, Daniel, you and I have had a very consistent conversation about, hey, things are going to get really interesting when we see business value driven incrementally through quantum. Now, the reality is, on any new type of technology, it has to go through a certain process, whether that's 5G that starts with research, whether that's generative AI that started with research 3 or 4 years ago. There was a seminal Google white paper that came out. The same is true for quantum. So we're in this zone of trying to look at what the researchers and scientists are coming up with to give us a better view when there's going to be incremental commercial volume. And you're going to want to pay attention to this. Essentially, IBM and Berkeley came together, did some serious research, and essentially showed that you can show quantum value without getting to the point where you need perfect qubits, okay? Because the foregone conclusion and why people are like, oh, this is 10 years away, is that we need to get the qubits to perfection with fault tolerance. And what IBM and Berkeley showed is that combining error mitigation with over 100 qubit quantum computer, you can show value that cannot be done by today's supercomputer with a CPU and a GPU. Well, not me, my quantum awesome analyst, Paul Smith-Goodson, has published a Forbes article. I actually did an interview with the head of quantum at IBM, Dr. Jay Gambetta, when I was over in Paris. So I've been sitting on this forever. It's pretty exciting. Check it out. I think quantum is going to be here and adding commercial value before most anybody else thinks. And I think this is more evidence of that.
So, let me ask you, Pat, and, normally I just come in and opine, but for a long time, we kind of have had this thesis, right? It's that quantum is cool, but it's like for like 1% of 1% of 1% of the human population that are physicists or, some type of deep engineers that can understand just extraordinary technical prowess. And what's happened is quantum computing has kind of been lost. Remember Chamath Palihapitiya said it's uninvestable?
Uninvestable, yes.
And mostly because the word is utility. And I saw Jay Gambetta quoted in the New York Times saying that that's what this moment is about. This moment is about finding utility. Is that kind of how you see it?
It is. I mean, it solved a physics problem using noisy qubits that a supercomputer can't, and it literally went head to head with it. Right? Are we ready to parse this off and have Salesforce and Oracle Fusion use it tomorrow? No, absolutely not. But what it did show is we didn't need to necessarily overcome having perfect qubits, or what's referred to as fault tolerance out there. So to me, this is an in-between state that most people out there had not considered, because right now people are lining up out there. They have either these perfect qubits, right, and like 12, right, so it can't do much, and then you have these very imperfect qubits that are super noisy, and you have thousands, tens of thousands. There was kind of nothing in between, and the approach that IBM had taken, which everybody was like, hey, love what you're doing, IBM, but the quality and the noisiness of what you have out there. And what IBM is doing is they are correcting those qubits farther up the path, which I think is something that people hadn't thought of.
And for a long time, by the way, there was a lot of sort of criticism of superconducting. A lot of the ion trapping companies just said that they would never get the fault tolerance. That was, by the way, I had been somewhat convinced, but at the same time, betting against Google and betting against IBM from a bunch of smaller players, maybe there is a certain amount of experience that we have that would say that those aren't great bets. But remember, Pat, if we say anything far enough into the future, we can be right. You just got to keep pushing.
Exactly. Just don't put a. And by the way, Daniel, when I was at AMD and NVIDIA was working with all of these researchers on AI, it looked like a bunch of BS. Okay, where GPUs were made to do compute. And when I was at AMD, we had ATI. We were working on it as well, and it looked like the Kobayashi Maru. And then boom, University of Toronto used NVIDIA GPUs to do image classification. Is it a cat? Is it a dog? Is it a human? And then it was like people became believers. We are still waiting for that University of Toronto moment for quantum, but I don't think we're 10 years away. I just don't. 5 years away feels a lot more comfortable for me right now.
There's something that maybe this generative AI boom can be attributed to in terms of making us smarter, and that's the law of diffusion of innovation is being short-circuited. Meaning, what used to take the diffusion of innovation used to take months to years, right, from the earliest adopters to laggards. And now what we're really seeing is, like, would you say that someone that's just trying ChatGPT for the first time today is probably a laggard at this point? Yeah. You're lagging. And what I mean is, like, it's just not true. Like, when BlackBerry came into market, there was like a few years by which BlackBerry users would have been considered kind of your early adopters, not like your leading edge, but just early adopters of smartphones. If you had an Apple iPhone in 07, 08, you were an early adopter of the iPhone. And all I'm saying is it took a few years, Pat. I mean, now we're seeing things down to months. Now, an enterprise technology like quantum is going to take longer, but don't bet on the long tail and some of the predictions that it's 5 and 10 years. These breakthroughs are coming faster and faster with less time in between. It's also another moment to just kind of, I think the market grossly undervalues IBM's research. And I know that we've said this a lot, but, they don't value the quantum business at all when you look at the actual price of the stock. And I know that that's not our job, but I always look at that for ground truth. They don't value the research they do in semiconductors, whether it's around 2 nanometer or others. They just haven't found a way to value it. And so I'm hopeful under Arvind Krishna, and I'm hopeful that through whether it's licensing or through the products they're able to build and put into market here, that IBM begins to get credit for some of the really critical technology they've been able to roll into the market.
IBM's doing some great stuff. And the way that they're approaching quantum is as if they've been through every major technology turn, and they don't feel like they were getting credit for where credit's due. So interesting stuff. My gosh, do we really have 1,700 people watching us right now on YouTube?
We do.
I think it's because you're in Europe, Dan. I think that's...
I don't know what it is. Maybe we should pod on Wednesdays more often.
No kidding. Exactly.
I mean, we did open the whole world to this thing. You should screenshot that, by the way. It's good social proof.
For proof and evidence. Hey, let's move to
top
what's
10.
That?
We could be up there with the all-in guys talking all enterprise tech, though. They get to talk about Trump and things that drive huge crowds. We talk about the hard stuff. This is actually...
By the way, you said Trump, and our viewers went from like 1750 to 1600.
No, sorry, Obama.
Exactly. Oh, there it goes. No, it's going. No. Hey, let's get into something we know a lot better than politics, and that's earnings. Oracle beat raise. Dan, what the heck's going on here?
First of all, have you seen the run? Okay. Like we got to do these victory laps from time to time. I think it was one of the first few times I ever went on CNBC. I had a Citi guy and me, and it was like a bull bear case. And basically he was putting the price target at like $60 and just beating up Oracle, no innovation, no disruption, bad business model, customers hate them. And I basically came in there and said, I think you're totally missing it. This was right as Gen 2 Cloud was starting to take shape. You were seeing this run since the acquisitions of NetSuite, Fusion, and this mountain of data the company has at its disposal. And I mean, just what a good quarter. I mean, the growth, fiscal revenue up 18%, 22 in constant currency. Now, remember, that's faster growth than Salesforce. And I'm not saying that to knock Salesforce. I'm saying Salesforce has been kind of a bellwether of software and growth. And, Oracle has found it's a bit of its stride now. And Pat, some of the numbers I think that were really interesting, and you and I both shared that cool app economy that shows kind of how the company makes money. But outside of that, there were some data points that they talked about in their growth. Look, infrastructure growth of 63% for the full year. So OCI's infrastructure right now is growing at about 3 times the clip of the other cloud providers. Now, they're not breaking out infrastructure anymore to the degree that which we would need to do a full-on comparison. But
I don't know. No, are you sure?
I don't think they break out just kind of IaaS anymore.
They
in any
literally are breaking out IaaS now. Is
Oracle.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Oracle, I mean, I can't compare to Oracle to what I guess I'm saying is my assertion is at 63 for the year, 77 for Q4. They're taking share. At this point, Oracle has to be taking market share now, albeit it's a pretty small number at about 1.5 billion.
Yeah.
But that is interesting because when you're growing at 3 times the market rate, it means some customers, and I have to imagine it's a combination of the more useful, utilitous Gen 2 and also the aggressive pricing that Oracle has. But Oracle still has great margins, so I want to make that pretty clear. The other thing that was really, Pat, that was pretty impressive was the 45% growth in their SaaS and cloud application business.
Where did that come from?
It does not calculate. I mean, again, are they taking business off of Dynamics and off of Salesforce and off of like SAP, like, you know, and they're never ones to not tell you on their earnings call. So they gave some good examples of customer wins that they've taken. But Pat, I mean, these are really, really impressive growth numbers. Now, that's the cloud application business. Now, I do want to be clear. They split out applications, Fusion, and NetSuite. So NetSuite's growing in the mid-20s, Fusion's in the mid-20s, then the rest of their cloud application, which is some of their CX and apps and stuff, that's growing at 45%, but still a really impressive growth rate across the board. The company also had a pretty big announcement around its, you know, some of what it's doing around Gen AI. And so it's basically going after having low cost. They partner with NVIDIA, but low cost GPU clusters. So they're going to take the pricing model, the low price model, to the market. In fact, this is something I've said for a while, and it was verified for me when I went to the Google Executive Cloud Forum, and I had customers, and I was talking to some of the leaders, the ones that are actually doing the Google's TPU, and they were doing the NVIDIA partnerships. And I asked the question, I said, as Gen AI is scaling and you're doing more AI with more customers, I said, do the customers care which silicon they're running anymore? If it's all done in Vertex, if it's all done using your front end. And basically what they said is that there is a significant shift. They were very bullish about NVIDIA, and they understand the value of that relationship. So they were not by any means poo-pooing that. But they basically did say that as more and more customers and startups, unless they're doing these really large, complex training, and, you know, that customers are more interested in just the efficiency and cost of being able to spin up AI apps like in a Gen AI app builder. Yeah. So it's kind of what's going on there. So you do have to wonder, is there sort of an interesting market opportunity for a pivot for Oracle, for those that do have these big training workloads, that if they can be the price performance leader in terms of offering the same hardware, will they have a chance to take some additional market? And I mean, clearly they're doing so with traditional cloud workloads, Pat. So, you know, look, it was an overall strong performance. And of course, you have a company that pays a dividend, that consistently does buybacks and returns to shareholders. And so no matter what, you know, my T-shirt, Pat, of my Rush class in college said, loved or hated, but never ignored. And I think that's really, you know, apropos for Oracle, you know, but the company just keeps executing, and you got to give them credit for that.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a little bit of a victory lap as well. Gen 1, I was brutal, and I wrote brutal stuff about Gen 1 OCI because it wasn't any good. It was overpriced, low performance. The technology was dated. To the company's credit, Gen 2 is literally just a miracle. And if you look at when the infrastructure was created, it's actually the youngest infrastructure architecture out there right now. So, you know, when Larry got on the call and he's talking about generative AI and he's saying, hey, we have the highest performance, lowest cost, and the biggest amount of scalability, most people might do an eye roll and say, okay, you know, that's Larry talking about, Larry, CTO and founder Larry Ellison and chairman. But you have to pay attention, right, to what he is saying, given the success that they're having with generative AI. And listen, I'm not confused about scale, okay? I know that AWS, Azure, and GCP have more scale, but AWS started 19 years ago. And Gen 2, I think, is 2 to 3 years old. And the business model that they have, too, is very interesting. Some cloud providers charge more for the basics than they do for the add-ons. And that's a theory that says, hey, if I can entice people with the add-ons and they pull through high-priced basics, that makes sense. Oracle is pricing their basics low and their add-ons high, which is another way to do pricing. And their business success is, you know, shows that it's working. Again, whether it's 20 times smaller, I don't care. This is a long game. You have to have scale and show up, and you have to build it, and then much bigger things can happen. So kudos to Oracle for the beat raise and the increased details, right? That 45% growth on SaaS apps, I have never seen that before, right? Like, what have they shown from Fusion and NetSuite has always been ERP. Now, they showed ERP for both, but that's, basically a 20%, 20 plus percent. I've never seen this 45%, and I got to dig in and see where this comes from. So, Dan, let's go into another AI discussion. Okay. So far, we saw IBM, we saw Dell. We know we're going to hear more from HPE about AI next week. But Lenovo wants to make sure that everybody knows what they're up to and what they're doing in AI. And you might guess, given the market share increases of Lenovo's infrastructure group and their capabilities on the edge, that they would be doing some serious business in AI. And the good news is they are. So in a release and discussion that we had with Kirk Skaugen and team, Novo says that they have revenue to over $2 billion with AI. And by the way, I really appreciate the putting a number on it, because it's so frustrating. Companies that want to be known for AI, they might very well be known for AI, and then don't put any detail around the monetary impact. So Lenovo took the shot here. They also said that they're going to make another $1 billion investment over 3 years to accelerate the deployment, and that's driven by research, centers of excellence, and other technology investments. But here's where I kind of want to auger in, right? They said we have the most comprehensive AI portfolio, okay? And as analysts, we always need to watch, right, those types of statements. Well, I burrowed in a little bit to that statement, and Lenovo sent me some proof points. And essentially, their measurement of being the most comprehensive is looking at Think System servers, Think Edge, Think Station, and Think Agile Edge, the amount of platforms that they have compared to HPE and Dell, and I think IBM. And based on Lenovo, the way that they are measuring it, Lenovo does in fact have the most comprehensive AI platform portfolio. So thanks to Lenovo on bringing that out and surfacing that. Thanks for having the courage to actually have a number. We appreciate that, and I'm going to look forward to following all the things in AI that you are going to do. I'm particularly interested in how you're looking at models. What are some proprietary generative AI models that the company can tee up? Who the company is aligning with, companies like Hugging Face as an example, to get a better picture of what the company is doing in the future. But we know that what they're doing today is making a difference, and they put a number on it: $2 billion.
Yeah, Pat, listen, the opportunity around AI has implications for every company, whether you're a kind of picks and shovels, memory and networking and DPUs, or your applications. But somewhere in the middle, the real hardware providers are getting a little bit lost in the shuffle. And this has brought, whether it's been Dell or HPE and now Lenovo, to really need to double down on making sure that their story resonates and lands. And, whether we talk to Kirk Skaugen or Flynn Malloy, and as they've been rolling this out to us, what I've really been impressed by is the commitment to the sort of full stack. And instead of seeing yourself as sort of the middle person in this overall opportunity, they're seeing themselves as sort of the one that does a lot of the customer interfacing. I mean, they are the provider of whether that's the PC and the laptop, or the core infrastructure, the GPUs. I mean, people are buying their compute. They're not actually going and buying it in most cases from the chip provider. They're buying AMD from a Lenovo, from some sort of partner. I mean, the real way a customer gets their equipment comes through multi-source. There's something called a channel, and the channel is really, really important. Now, the massive investment, the multi-billion-dollar investment, is worth noting. I thought the what they call the Innovators Program, that was also really, really a valuable thing. Starting to turnkey these, Pat, because you know how I was kind of going on and lamenting about the Google Gen AI app builder. It's the same thing with infrastructures. How do I spin up that right hardware? And the thing is not everything is going to be done in the hyperscale public cloud. But you know what? If it is, Lenovo provides a lot of hardware to them as well. So Lenovo kind of has the hedge going on there.
Yes.
And so they're partnering with the edge. They're partnering with ISVs. They're investing hundreds of millions of dollars. They're building software plus hardware solutions. They're doing a lot of things right. And Pat, this has been reflected. And don't get confused about Lenovo's somewhat soft end of year numbers. That was all in the PC business.
That's right.
The ISG business and the services business has been really robust.
50% growth.
And I think that, they need to get adequate credit for that. So this moment is really more about establishing that there's a really critical role for companies like Lenovo that are, the plumbing in many ways of all the requirements to deliver AI at scale. And it was a really positive announcement for the company. So, it wasn't like hey, we rolled out this new thing. It was kind of like hey, we have a story. And as I alluded to with Salesforce, Pat, I'll allude to here, not a new story. This didn't start with generative AI. They've been doing this for a while now. And so, I think it's appropriate that they raise their hands and say, we'd like to get credit.
Good stuff, Dan. And I'll add that unlike all the other OEMs, Lenovo has a hyperscaler business. So anytime you see the hyperscalers, there could be a chance that Lenovo was part of that. Let's dive into our last topic. We have 4 minutes left. Microsoft Activision deal hits another snag, this time in the U.S. and shockingly not just in the U.K. What's going on here, Dan?
I mean, look, it's not really any surprise, but it was worth covering. That the FTC basically put a temporary request to block this acquisition, setting a hearing. The long and short term is that I think this is partially the Lena Khan. I think it's partially that it needs more time to spend to really look at this deal. It probably wants to make sure that it gets a voice. A lot of credit was going over to the UK. Right now we're kind of in this anti-growth environment. Nobody wants to see big companies get bigger, and certainly not on the watch of this administration, which really promised to enforce that. Having said that, very little real enforcement has been done. Now, you and I came out. They haven't. The FTC hasn't actually made any real comment, by the way, on why they're doing this. But Microsoft doesn't seem to feel it's that big of a risk for them. They came out and said that this is going to give more choice to the gaming market. And Pat, I'm going to stick by what I said. I think there's enough competition that besides the size of this deal, I can't really figure out what we're regulating. Okay, and I'm only saying that because between console, subscription services, mobile gaming, PC gaming, there just seems to be enough choice that, again, this is one of those where I just spin my wheels and I bang my head on the desk and go, but the App Store. Like, why are we spending so much time on deals like this? Now, are there certain titles that are extremely popular within this? It could see some pricing power, yes. But overall, Pat, I think this is another kind of stop and pause moment. I don't get the feeling this is I think they will win out the U.S. I just don't see it actually being stopped. But I think the optics here are showing that some additional consideration, that it didn't fly through, that some extra thought was given to this thing before ultimately making the decision to approve it.
You sure you don't want to talk more on this one, Dan?
Do you want me to talk more? That was fast. Wasn't that fast?
Like 7 minutes or no, I'm just kidding. No, listen, I'm gonna fill in the blanks here. We just have 1 minute left. Um, Regulatory bodies seem to be places that innovation dies, where they're just not focused on the right things. I do think that this deal will go through given the right concessions. Microsoft, I'm sure, has already given the Sony concession on that. And heck, if you're you don't make money off the gaming console, you make money off the game. Okay, so maybe this is Apple, right? They want some commitment that people will write directly to their Metal API and their crappy notebooks that can't run games right now, because nobody wants to write to Metal, right? So, but this is going to go through. This is a temporary stop. But anyways, I think we exhausted all this content in here. Dan, thanks for tuning in. Oh, it's pretty late there in Malaga, I'm sure. But thanks for tuning in, dude. Really appreciate that. Uh-oh, it looks like we have lost Dan. He has frozen there, but it's a good smile. Hey, I'm going to take us home. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in to the 6-5. We appreciate you, and we appreciate everything that you bring to the table, tuning in every week. And there's Dan. Dan is back, baby.
We're so close to having the perfect exit there. That was like what they call an Irish exit, where I just kind of left before it was actually over.
Now it's perfect. Now it's good. I mean, yeah.
Pickup. It was one of those where you had the 24-hour renewal, and the network literally went down because I didn't renew it.
No, I love that. But hey, thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate you and appreciate you coming in midweek. We'll see you in 10 days.
5,270 of you.
I know, unless we decide to do this on another Wednesday again. But stick in 9 a.m. Central Time, our normal time, and take care. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great week.